bad boy. Okay, welcome everybody to the July 14th, 2023 FMDiSC meeting. We've got some really great content today. I'm happy to say we've got some new presenters. We've got some first timers. We've got people from over the water and some long established friends of ours in the community. So I think we're going to be in for a really good show today. To kind of kick things off, we're going to start with a talk with one of the FileMaker community's long established compadres, and that's Barb Levine Ritterman. So I'm going to, by the way, before we get started, Barb, you got your mic up, you're ready to rock?
Yes, I am.
Just, this is one of those full disclosure things. When people ask me, do I know Barb Levine Ritterman, I have to just give full disclosure. I got married a few years ago, and these are the groomspeople in my wedding party. So if you'll notice, there's a shorter member there with Barb. So Barb and I go back quite a way, and we know each other's families. We've known each other for a dozen years plus, et cetera, and we're very good friends. So anyway, this is going to be very fun for me. So Barb, let's start with kind of your beginnings in the computer world. You actually have a career that spans into the 1970s in the world of computers.
That's true. I was hired by the state agency that tracks children and families to be a trainer on their mainframe system that was tracking families with kids in foster care, their payment receipts. And so they discovered, to their great surprise, apparently, that the programmers did not make good trainers. So I was brought in as a trainer. I had taught people how to do various things before, and I picked up the tech side pretty readily, having always been a math and science kind of person coming up. So it was grant funded. The position only lasted for a year, but that was 1979. So it was a very different time.
Wow. And then obviously, you had a path. I don't think FileMaker existed in 1979. So before we talk about your introduction to FileMaker, how did your path move towards that? Where were those middle years between doing that training and then how you ended up eventually getting to the database world?
Well, I actually took a detour. After the state job, I worked for a food co-op as their director of training and membership services. And then I left there to become the trainer at an early microcomputer company. These were CPM and MPM based machines back in the early 80s. Some of you weren't even here then, I think, some of the younger members of the group. And I was teaching people word processing and spreadsheets. And then eventually I got hired by a different computer firm that was an Apple dealer. So these were Apple IIs, Apple's IIIs, and the Apple Lisa, which was a short-lived but groundbreaking GUI interface machine. And so my niche was interacting mostly with business people who wanted to learn how to replace their typewriters and their green columnar pads with these new cool tools called spreadsheets and word processors.
If I recall, I seem to remember, I'm not quite sure if my history on this is correct, but I seem to remember the Lisa also being pretty embraced in education spaces. Is that true?
Yes, it was. There was starting to be an Apple footprint in education. But the fact that this Apple dealership, this was long before the days of dedicated Apple stores, which sold the 2s and the 3s. I was on their staff when the first Mac came out. So I was able to benefit from what was called the Own a Mac program, where Apple outlet people, staff people could buy a Mac at a discount. And I got to train people and
Okay,
say,
done.
that
Okay, so
thing
now
that-
what do you want me to look at?
Oh, somebody needs to.
You sent me an email,
I just forwarded you the email with a sample export.
and this is from them. This is from the company.
Okay, Barb, can you unmute?
Yes, I can.
There we go. Good, I'm sorry, continue, please.
So I got to teach people how to put in their hand this thing that looked like a bar of soap, but was called a mouse because it had a tail. And it was like, I know it feels like you're being asked to do things with a bar of soap in your hand, but you will get the hang of this, and to teach them how to do fine motor movements with a mouse.
I grew up in a household where my dad was messing around with Commodores and pets and some of the earliest of PCs, home computers and so forth. Everybody in the family was in a blizzard of confusion, including my grandmother. I don't understand this stuff. And I came home one day with a Mac and showed my grandmother how to use the mouse, and watched that. That was one of the first entries, I think, for a lot of people to go, I get it, I can point with this thing. So I'm sure you saw that as well.
Absolutely.
So eventually you're around the Apple ecosystem. You've been playing with spreadsheets years before many people even knew what they were. You're kind of out over your skis, as I like to say. You're sort of like really leaning into the early waves of technology as they appeared. What led you? I mean, I guess I can see the progression, but if you're playing with spreadsheets, how did you get introduced into the FileMaker platform?
Well, two things happened. One was I started writing Lotus 1-2-3 macros. And this was my introduction to programming, if you will. And it was like, oh, this is fun. You can take tedious manual tasks that people do with their spreadsheets and automate them. And then I found databases, and there was a raft of them, both PC and Mac at that point. I remember Q&A on the DOS side and double helix on the Mac side. And there were and record holder on the Mac side.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was FileMaker. And I stopped being distributed among this variety of tools that I was using for a variety of clients, where I said, no, it's not a spreadsheet, it's a database, it's three-dimensional. We need to keep track of better information. And I remember starting to use FileMaker in the middle 80s, because my first billable FileMaker project was for a laboratory in 1988.
So therein lies a bit of progression. Number one, look at these early products, picking a winner, if you will, of those, the ones that you adopt and feel good about. I know I feel quite good about picking FileMaker over double helix at this point in my career. So that's great. You moved into this, hey, can you help us build this thing? And we're gonna put money in your hands, and you're gonna put code in our hard drives. How did that progress? How did you get from that point to where you actually said, this is me and I'm hanging a shingle, and the birth of microserve?
Well, I'm gonna back up a level and say that the birth of microserve was when the Apple dealership that I was working for decided they couldn't afford a trainer anymore. And so they laid me off and said, but you could take your training clients with you. And so that was in 1984, and I named the business Microcomputer Services to cover a broad umbrella to cover I did not know what. I knew it would be more than computer training and spreadsheets, but I did not know what it would come on to. And microcomputer is a term that nobody uses anymore, but it sort of stuck. So Microserve was the business name. Back to FileMaker, though, I was in a bookstore browsing computer books, and I found a book by FileMaker by Rich Colombre. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not the only FileMaker developer out here, because we all discover things, and it was much harder to find who else was doing development work. And that led to reading the book, which was a book aimed at developers, and going up to the support group for some FileMaker training classes, and getting exposed to, so we must be in the late 80s, early 90s now.
We're probably in the 2.1 sort of 3.
Yes.
Kind of almost getting into that at this point, right?
Right.
Yeah, that book by it's funny, there's a number of books over the years. Fantastic one, Handbook of Relational Database Design, written by a couple of women. I think one of them was Flynn. I forget the names. Fantastic book. So many of my cohorts have read that. I know a lot of people in the FileMaker community that also latched on to that book by Rich. And again, just to know, I'm not alone. There are it's a thing to be a user of FileMaker, and even like a bigger thing to be able to sort of make a living with it. So Microserve, we're doing training. I'm helping people hook up printers and modems, possibly building spreadsheets. You're the computer person that's just smarter at this stuff than I am. And like many of us that started that way, you start slowly kind of specializing a little bit more and more over time. So when did you start really feeling I'm really not a computer consultant anymore, and I'm really more of a FileMaker consultant?
Well, I know that in 94, I joined whatever, was it called the Claris Solutions Alliance then?
CSA, yeah.
And so there was then some AOL message board, the Darren Terry facilitated. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but it was the beginning of a FileMaker community there. And I remember that by the late 90s, I was peeling off my non-FileMaker clients and saying FileMaker is what I want to specialize in.
Yeah, that AOL, I remember, I want to say Kevin Junt, John Mark was in there, a handful of people, Joel Stoner was in there. I remember running across a lot of people who I still know today that were just
Lynn Allen, I see your hand.
Yeah, there's a lot of us that were just kind of poking around and asking questions and learning stuff. It was just a font of information. One of the other things that sort of kind of put things on a map, which I know you've got a pretty good history here also, is oh my gosh, FileMaker Inc., or Claris at that point, it was still Claris, I think, was going to have this thing called a developer conference. And so, oh my gosh, I can see breathing people. This isn't, on a chat room or whatever. I can talk with people and go to these sessions and learn from some of the strongest in the community. Did you experience that? Of course.
Absolutely. I missed the very first one. I had a tiny baby at the time and couldn't travel yet, but I was at the second one and all of the subsequent ones. And for me, it was really focal, a time to connect both in sessions and out with other people who were doing the same work that I was doing. And it was eye-opening. I believe at that first one that I attended, I met someone who presented himself as the old advance man.
We don't
That
know.
being Mr. Blackwell.
That's right.
Here somewhere.
Yeah, when you see Mr. Blackwell at DEF CON and you add ribbons for every distinction that you have, his goes, I think, down to the floor. So Stephen has been just one of the pillars for decades. My first DEF CON, I went to first one, missed the second one, and I think 2007, and I've been at all of them. But my first DEF CON, I had this other scared little individual developer sitting next to me, and we befriended each other. Her name is Wendy King, and we just walked from each session and we're just blown away. There was a gentleman, we went to a relational design session afterwards. This guy came out who was just knocking my eyeballs out. His name was Chris Moyer, and he was just like, oh my God, he's talking about relational design and how does this all work? So those were some exciting days in those early days of DEF CON. Where from a standpoint, you start doing your first couple of projects. You start getting, well, this is a little grant company that needs assistance, perhaps, or this is an educational institute. These things have different, workflows, different things, and so forth. How did you craft your discovery style when you're sitting down with a customer? How did you start figuring out, what do I need to do in order to make sure this goes well?
Well, the first point was trying to get the right people to the table for discovery. That often a manager or a department head or an owner of a business would say, let me tell you what we need. And I would be, let's bring in the people who are doing the work so that we can know what their pain points are, what their ideas are, and what would make the most sense. So the first question was not what goes on around the table, but who comes to sit at the table. And then the second one was really listening to workflow and listening to pain points, listening to the things that can done repetitively or that are cumbersome or require redundant data entry. I got called into a wholesaler, a grocery store wholesaler sort of middle agency that used lots of outside salespeople, and they had 90 spreadsheets that they completed every month to tally those salespeople's commissions. And I reviewed, because there were spreadsheets by product and spreadsheets by vendor and spreadsheets by salesperson, and it all had to be brought together. And I wrote a database based on my conversations with them and my review of the spreadsheets. And I completed a month that they had already paid for commissions for. And my calculated commission numbers were different from those, which sort of struck me in the, uh-oh, did I miss something basic here? And instead, I had to go through and find all the spreadsheet errors, formula errors, data transposition errors. The errors were on their side. They were quite chagrined when I did this presentation of, look what I found in the discrepancy analysis. But it was a really powerful reminder to me of how imperfect spreadsheets can be as a business management tool. They have their place, but they get misused a lot as well.
Well, 90 spreadsheets and the proliferation, that's one of those things where a little of something is good and a lot of something can be a little too much. That's such a great feeling when you have that first and foremost, I can't possibly, I have to be the one that made the mistake here. If these numbers aren't matching up, go through and do the math and go, wow, this is not me. It's not about me or they. It's about, we found an issue. We saved this customer or brought attention to a gross error. And we've got confidence moving forward. So what a great story. How about so from a discovery design, you're working through those workflows, you're identifying those bottlenecks and pinch points, obviously the redundancy and so forth. One of the things that I have enjoyed, I've worked with you a bit in the past and so forth, you produce a pretty thorough set of documents through your discovery and design process, sort of here's a culmination. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, I needed both for my sake and for verification from the client to get it down in writing so that we were in agreement both on what the goals of the project were, what the basic workflow was, and how we were going to craft a tool to improve or expedite that workflow. And I was using Word documents. I understand that other people have found other tools, but Word was one that everybody has access to. And sometimes I would, in many instances, go through the work plan with the client line by line to make sure I wasn't building something that was different from what they were envisioning.
Yeah, that's anytime you get a point of friction with a customer, I thought it was going to do this, you thought it was going to do this. Again, that documentation and sitting down and going, this is my understanding of what we're talking about, and I hope it's your understanding as well. And just the other aspect of it, I'm sure you're generally have been a sole developer for a good chunk of your time. Putting something in a drawer, customer comes back 4 weeks later, they say, let's go, and you've had 2 or 3 other systems in your head. So having that roadmap, super helpful.
And I also frequently had subcontractors working with me. So it gave us an agreed upon set of ground rules specifications that we could go back to. One of the things that's interesting, you are in New Haven, Connecticut, and I think it's across the street from your office of many years is Yale University, who's been a customer of yours for years. You've been sort of passed around in multiple departments there over the years, haven't you? I have. That first database that I built in FileMaker in 1988 was for the pathology department that had these deep freezers of frozen tissue samples and needed to be able, if a researcher said, I need slides that are matched tumor and normal for from the same breast cancer patient, what do you have? Needed to be able to say what they had and where they were. So it was one of those instances where I worked with one of their staff who was a subject matter expert. I didn't know anything about tissue pathology, but I learned a lot to build the database. But over the course of the years, I built a DNA synthesis database, a database for the Institute of Sacred Music, one at the medical school that tracked placental specimens in women that were having miscarriages, one at the School of Architecture that tracked faculty hiring and salaries and class assignments. So yes, I've been involved with many departments of the university, even continuing into the years when they had their own FileMaker IT department. Wow, as that sort of meta consultant or a heavy lift agent that can maybe do or supplement some of their internal staff. Or sometimes had more availability than they did, or find better credentials in terms of certification. At that point, I was a platinum partner, those kinds of things.
Yeah, the one of the other interesting things I've learned in our talks, you started working with a health district in Connecticut at one point in time, and lo and behold, Barb Levine became this sort of cottage industry for probably about 15 different health districts, et cetera, in the state.
Yes, the health districts in Connecticut track restaurant inspections and beauty salon inspections and all sorts of information needed for public health. And the first district found me about 15 years ago when they had a system that had been created by a health department director with the help of an outside FileMaker developer, and then freely distributed to other health departments. But they wanted to modify it, and they went online and found the then FileMaker website and found me, and I helped them make more professional and reliable the databases they were using. And they then passed my name on to other health districts. So yes, I learned more than I wanted to about food inspections and septic inspections. And
Who doesn't want to learn more about septic inspections?
really,
so you mentioned earlier, and this is something I don't think a lot of people knew, but you know, there's this organization at Apple, it's called Claris, and they've got multiple products. And of course, they start trimming things down and get rid of Claris Draw and Claris Works, and all those things go internal to Apple. And you're left with this FileMaker Incorporated, which is largely, at that point, I think they were doing Homepage and Claris Homepage, and they were doing FileMaker. So there's this group of associates within there called the CSA, the Claris Solutions Alliance. And they had I think they had the subscriber level at points, the associate level. The associate level was largely, you know, give me an example of your code and fill out this form and we'll rubber stamp you. And then they had the partner, or pardon me, the platinum level, of which you were one of the earliest members of that platinum group of CSA members. How was that?
That was quite an experience. It was a much more elaborate application process. And because I can remember, you had to submit a business plan, you had to submit samples of your work, you had to submit, it was much more rigorous and involved than the associate application process had been. But I was a platinum partner for 15 or maybe 20 years. It's not quite clear to me the dates.
Yeah.
And it gave me an opportunity to be meeting with other businesses that were really focused on FileMaker. It wasn't just one tool in their workbox. It was really their primary focus. And we got to take part in meetings with FileMaker that gave us previews of coming attractions. It helped get us entree to becoming beta testers, or to perhaps participate in FileMaker kitchens. And so those were really precious opportunities to be in communication with both other partners and with the mothership.
I think approximately we're a platinum, partner, if you will, at the moment, Angel City Data. I think we're one of about I want to guess to say there's about 60 worldwide. Back in this day, there's maybe a dozen or two. Is that right? And if I'm not mistaken, was there any other woman-owned platinum or partner level of the CSA?
Not at the time that I came on board. I think I was something like number 16 or 17 as a partner. And it was a mix at that point of larger shops, some of whom had multi-state presences, and mid-sized shops and some sole proprietors like myself.
Yeah,
John Osborne was an early.
Mark, Stephen Blackwell, there's a number of the
Yeah.
solo shops, and then obviously, you know, some of the early multi-person shops, some of them still around today. So, you know, it's funny, when I was talking to Barb about this interview today, she's like, well, I really haven't done anything. I'm like, you're the first woman to have a CSA partner distinction, and you were there when there was hardly anybody else in your gender being represented. So I think that's phenomenal.
Yes, I actually remember an early DevCon where I passed by a line of guys in between sessions and realized that it was a line that trailed out the door of a men's room. Now, this is frequently a problem with women's rooms. And at that point, I would say women's attendance at DevCon was in the 10% range.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, well, there's a lot of disadvantages to being in the minority, but having to wait in line to use the bathroom between sessions is not one of them.
Yep. That takes me into, and again, I think for a lot of the modern I think, you know, you have those early FileMaker developers that go back 20 years, et cetera. You've got the newer crop that are 5-10 years. And then you get those groups in the middle that were in that heavy growth period. And I think you were sort of a North Star. I mean, with respect to, I remember the very first DevCon where, oh, there's a woman's luncheon over here. And you know, we now have women of FileMaker, which has become Women Innovating Together and all this, but the women's movement in the FileMaker community, you were absolutely one of the sparks of that entire thing. Can you tell us how that started?
Yeah, it actually started as a breakfast, a Women of FileMaker breakfast. I can remember Eileen Silver was there. Bev, were you there? I don't know if Bev was there.
I was, yeah.
Yes, Joyce Lilliman Boschert was there.
With her knitting?
Yeah, so it was small groups of us just around a breakfast table that eventually expanded to a lunch and eventually acquired an organization, Women of FileMaker, that got some help from Claris in getting a spot on the schedule at DevCon for a lunch meeting. So it really was important to me to see who the other women were and to support especially the newcomers who were new in this community and who may not see many other women around them, and to give them a hand, as was done to all of us when we were first starting.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've been blessed with, and some of these people were standing next to you, and some of these people have taken the baton from you. But, you know, my earliest days, obviously, Lynn here in our group, she's always been a presence. You know, Elise and Ann Verinder and Elise Kazar and Colleen Hammersley and Wendy King and a lot of those people that did presentations and that were active in the community and so forth. They are sort of the, you know, the icebreaker that kind of broke through some of the ice and have made it so much easier for a wider and more diverse crop of people coming in afterwards. So thank you. If nobody's ever told you, thank you for bringing those efforts to the community, because it certainly makes this community a much richer space. The other interesting thing about you, oh pioneer, is you know, we've got a Rick Kallman here. We're going to talk about him behind his back. You know, over the years, we've had a number of, yeah, there he goes. That's right. Over the years, we've had a number of initiatives with people at FileMaker. You know, I don't know if a lot of people know, but there are times when Claris is going, wow, we're really struggling with a question about this, or we have a couple of ideas. And, you know, we see that manifested in things back in the day of we would have these kitchens where maybe 50 people would come to the Wedge Auditorium, and the engineers would talk with us about things. And oftentimes little skunkworks projects, Heather Winkle would grab a handful of 8 or 10 of us, and you were always in those groups. Can you tell me about some of the groups you've been in and what you enjoyed about them?
Well, what I enjoyed was the opportunity to try to bridge the gap that often existed, the communications gap between the developer community on the one hand and FileMaker or Claris on the other hand. Sometimes the communication had felt like it was all coming at us. And so we were, as developers, trying to be heard and trying to make suggestions both about how the product could grow, how the product features could be better, and how the developer relations with FileMaker could be improved. And some of these came from people like Rick, who organized kitchens. I felt very honored to be part of those and to do the homework. I remember explaining to my father, who said, "What? They're not paying you to go out there to this kitchen? You're volunteering your time and your travel energy?" I said, "Dad, this is my livelihood. I've bet the farm on my collaboration with this company. And it was a good investment for me to do that." Now, sometimes I can remember a group of us meeting with Dominique and Rick, I think.
Yeah. I think I'm going to say Keith Harris and probably Delphina. And I think Ryan Rosenberg. I think it was you, Darren Terry, myself, Steve Abrahamson, and Verinder. Ray Colligan?
Yep.
Sitting across from each other, and again, free exchanges, right?
Right. And they were really important. Sometimes we felt like much was heard, but not much was accomplished. Other times we saw in action the fruits of those conversations.
That group was responsible for coining the term and coming up with the concept of under the hood. So when you see Claris to this day going, "Oh, we're going to have an under the hood session," that came from us giving them the name of the definition and how we had sat in those kitchens in the past with engineers really understanding the flow of electrons and how the product worked, and going, everybody needs to see this stuff. And I think that helped shine some light in that area. But we also did, you worked with Heather Winkle on some skunkworks issues too. How was that?
Oh, that was great. We were working on design initiatives within FileMaker, and it had to be very careful. I was honored to be part of it. We tried to be visionary. Some of it got implemented sooner, some of it came later, some of it we might still be waiting for. But it was a good time.
Yeah. The one of the other things, and then we're gonna pivot on to a little bit of personal life and so forth. You've been to a lot of DEF CONs, you've been to a lot of FMDiSC and so forth. What are some of the big lightning bolt moments for you being in this community where you just went, "Oh my gosh, that's such a nice thing," or "I've got to start doing that," or what are some of those moments that you remember as real milestones in your development career?
Well, I always remember going to DEF CONs and taking two sets of notes, one that was about the content that I was learning, and the other, the sort of bullet points about how I was going to apply it to active client projects. But the third part was what happened on the lazy river or in hallway conversations where you would be comparing notes with other developers. And they might have been notes about FileMaker. They might have been notes about client management strategies. They might have been notes about our personal lives. But the making personal, the very real network that we had built through what was originally that AOL online board, and then Tech Talk, and then now the Claire's community, making it real.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well said. One of the interesting things that I find about my friend is you and your wife have been married for a gazillion years and have two children who I've met. They're both fantastic, young adults now, if we're going to be truthful. You were lead plaintiffs on gay marriage. How was that? Tell us that story.
Okay, I will tell you that story. In 2003, we were asked to join a lawsuit that was ultimately filed in 2004 to bring gay marriage to Connecticut. This was the time in which only Massachusetts had gay marriage, and they were looking for families scattered around the state with children or without them, urban or not, to be the public face of this lawsuit. And so we had joined the suit, and then I got diagnosed with cancer, which some of you may remember. I showed up bald from chemo at the DevCon in 2004, I guess it was, but I said, this makes it even more important for me to do this work because I want children to know that their parents are safe, that their relationship with their parents is safe. I mean, I used to carry in my pocket, in my wallet, a paper that Robin wrote saying she authorized me to make medical emergency decisions about Joshua, because we'd each given birth to one of our children and had no legal relationship to the child that we hadn't birthed. Fast forward to 2009, the lawsuit prevails at the Connecticut Supreme Court level. After being overturned at the lower court level, it won at the Supreme Court level, and that ruling came down in New Haven. And we were the first couple in the state of Connecticut to get a marriage license, the first same-sex couple. And that landed us on the front page of the New York Times. I learned the term above the fold. It was our 15 seconds of fame.
Wow, that's so amazing. So, you know, I think a lot of us have known you for years, and we know these dribs and drabs about you. And I think it is not underselling when we say pioneer applies in your professional life, your home life, your associate life, all of that sort of thing. You've always been at the forefront of a number of things. So like I said, I think it's remarkable. It's a remarkable point about your character. So we're kind of getting to the end here. April 1st of this year was a bit of a notable milestone for one Barb Levine Ritterman. Can you tell us?
Sure. I turned 70 and decided to back off from microserve, that I wanted to leave my clients in good hands, but move on to a more limited role in the FileMaker world so that I would have more time to do the things that I love with the people I love, so that I am, I guess you would say, semi-retired, My clients are now safely in the hands of a variety of trusted FileMaker developers. I'm doing part-time work, but I don't have to do any more server upgrades or figure out how to troubleshoot some of those most gnarly problems all on my own. And it's a good thing.
That's fantastic. What a great arc. 79, I'm doing training in this thing called computers that hardly anybody understands. And now I've gone full circle leading the charge in so many areas. So what a great story. We've got just a minute or two, but if there's anybody that has any specific questions for Barb, pop them out there right now.
I just wanted to give a shout out to another person who was there at the beginning with us, who's no longer with us, and that's Lynn Bradford.
Oh,
I
thank
remember
you,
her
Lynn.
with
Absolutely.
great fondness. Yeah, she was a terrific developer and just a sweet person. So
I had the
I remember
great
those days.
privilege of knowing Lynn, but not only that, of having worked with 3 generations of her family, her father, her, and her children. So I would wholeheartedly concur in that. And Barb has been a close friend for a number of years. We've worked on a number of projects. I've gotten her into some of these messes that she worked her way through. But I didn't know until today about the influence that Rich Columbri's book had on you. And if you'll open that book to the frontispiece, you'll find this name of the strange guy who was the technical editor of that book.
Uh-huh.
One Mr. Stephen H. Blackwell.
And I would be remiss if I didn't add about Women in FileMaker, which has become Women Innovating Together, that the mission has been raising scholarship funds in part to enable first-time attendance to what we used to call DevCon and is now Engage. And that work is still underway.
Yep, it's a fantastic group, and your fingerprints, whether they're as deeply embedded in it today as in yesteryear, your fingerprints and DNA are all over that organization. Thank you again for Barb Levine. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed talking with her. I think our next up is going to be Mr. Chris Moyer doing again the news of the hour. Chris?
I will take it away. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. This is the news roundup. And for those of you who haven't seen this before, I sort of start zoomed way out in the tech ecosystem in general, and then sort of bring it into the focuses that are more adjacent to what we do. So this is the July installment. And I would be remiss to not acknowledge Gary Palmer of the Brighton user group in the UK, who I've shamelessly ripped this idea off of because they did it first and they do a great job of it. And so I must give them that homage. Just real quickly, Microsoft is a big thing, and Mr. Blackwell sent this over to me a few days ago. So apparently, there are a couple of Chinese hacker groups, one called Storm 0558, and the other one is, I can't remember, but it'll come to me in a second. They have stolen a Microsoft account consumer signing key and have been able to forge credentials to break into Microsoft 365 Exchange servers. And so this was first detected by the Department of State last month. They told Microsoft about it. Microsoft looked into it and found that a whole bunch of people have been compromised. Department of Commerce was also affected, but a lot of private companies. And the Department of Homeland Security is kind of annoyed at Microsoft because the way this was detected was through log analysis on logs that are only available if you are at the highest tier of Microsoft's cloud services, E5 for the commercial sector, G5 for the government sector. And, you know, some of these accounts that they notified that you've been compromised by the Chinese, they went and looked at their logs and they couldn't find it because they were on E3 or lower. And so anyway, they're catching some heat saying you absolutely need to make these logs available to people if they can't catch the bad guys without access to them. So there's a little bit of dance going on with that. Patch Tuesday, this past Tuesday, there were a whole bunch of patches released. Let me see, 37 remote code execution bugs were fixed. 9 were rated critical. One of them is still unpatched and is being actively exploited. So that's bad. So ongoing stuff happening. Some of you may have noticed your Apple devices rebooting overnight over the last couple of days. Apple released a 0-day patch. My Mac wanted to reboot this morning. My phone rebooted last night. And then also USB drive attacks are back, which is wild because, you know, back in the day they had rubber duckies and things like that, and that there's like bad USB and Pico Ducky and Arduino, and they have the OMG cables, which looks like a regular either Lightning or USB-C charging cable, but it's actually got a chip inside of it and can run payloads and stuff like that. And so everyone had sort of thought that USB drive attacks were a thing of the past and have started, you know, focusing their attention elsewhere, and then boom, this comes up. Mandiant, which is a cybersecurity firm, released a report about how 2 different USB malware campaigns have been observed this year. One's called Sogu, and that's from a Chinese espionage threat group called Tempex, and the other one is called Snowy Drive, which is from a group called UNC 4698. So anyway, lots happening in the security space out there. It's amazing to me that the State Department was ahead of the game over Microsoft and had to let them know what was going on. Here's the sort of breakdown of who's been affected by this. And so note that 1/10 of all these spaces are IT groups. So for any of you folks who have to partner with IT groups in maintaining FileMaker servers, you know, this could affect you at some point. So just heads up, watch your servers. Let's see, Threads is in the news. So, you know, it's amazing to me that for the longest time, Elon Musk had this reputation as the smartest guy in the room. And now it seems like he gets up every morning and tries to figure out which toe to shoot off. It's amazing to me. Like, here's a company that relies on advertising, and his move is to limit the number of tweets that users can look at. And so restricting the eyeballs that the advertisers would pay for is a novel approach to making money, but whatever. Anyway, Meta has taken advantage of this and created a Twitter competitor called Threads. And they have taken the crown from ChatGPT on fastest app to hit 100 million users. So I think it took them, what, 5 days, something like that. So some pundits are saying they cheated. You know, they already had 1 billion users on Instagram. So this isn't really true adoption. But anyway, it's a big deal. And I don't know that I have much to say about that. I get Threads is not equivalent to Twitter right now. It's missing some features, but it's coming on. Probably a lot of people on this meeting have gotten onto Threads, but it remains to be seen if it's truly going to supplant Twitter, because the Twitter user base is multiples of the Threads user base right now. Let's see, sort of another segue to the Elon Musk theme is that he announced XAI on July 12th. And he's got some serious talent in the stable there. So a lot of these people are from DeepMind, Google Research, Microsoft Research, and these are serious people. They're not corporate hood ornaments. I think Musk fancies himself a corporate hood ornament, but as I said, he's lost a lot of credibility. They are incidentally having a Twitter space today at 4 p.m. So for those of you interested in finding out more about this, that's going on. And then Apple released public betas of their operating systems, macOS, iOS. They have some new stuff coming in here. You can sign up to the beta, but you have to have an Apple ID to do it. And then once you sign up, you can go to the software update page and pick the beta of your choosing. It'll run on iPhone XS, XR, or anything newer. iPad OS 17 requires a 6th gen or newer iPad. They have things like improved autocorrect, new iMessage, AirDrop features. You can have separate user profiles for Safari and things like that. So possibly of interest to some of us. And then June 27th, we had the Claris Under the Hood. I'm not sure how many people attended. There was a ton of stuff that was gone over, and much of it pretty esoteric, minutiae. So these are just some of the highlights. There's a bunch more. You can do separate logging for script errors on the FileMaker server. They showed WebDirect using Nginx for load balancing. So the chart they showed looked something like this. So you have Nginx sitting out there, and it's talking directly to the secondary servers when you're serving up a WebDirect application. So this was interesting that they're being pretty explicit about Nginx's place in the ecosystem. So I thought that was interesting to see. Java trash collection, pretty low overhead. So they would recommend running it fairly often in an automated fashion in WebDirect environments. That was newsy. PDF thumbnails, which, you know, have worked fine on the Mac for a long time, but were problematic on Windows and Ubuntu. Those are now on those platforms. QR codes got added to those as well. Microsoft and Google OAuth supported on the server. The file hosting limit increased from 128 to 256. There was also some stuff about Docker support enhancements were announced for Ubuntu 2204 for ARM 64 and AMD 64. The Docker scripts that you develop will still work on Ubuntu 20.04. And there are a couple of different network options. You can do bridge network and Mac VLAN networks. So lots of little stuff on there. And I don't know if that recording is out there. Rick, if you know the answer to that, that would be, feel free to chime in. But I haven't seen it, but I haven't looked terribly hard for it. Also in the Claris announcements department, they just announced the new certification program. There's going to be more of them, but the first two that they're starting off with are the Claris FileMaker Pro Associate, using FileMaker Pro and Claris Pro for custom app development, and the Claris Connect Associate, using Claris Connect to integrate third-party apps. The Pearson View test is being retired at year end. I think that was announced prior to this announcement, but just to reiterate, you can still take the old test up to the end of the year, but this is newsy. There's a link if you want to go find out more about it and, you know, sort of watch this space to see what other certification exams will be released. Claris Studio, June 27th, they dropped their latest build. You can copy results in a spreadsheet field. Team managers no longer delete views that are automatically created when a table was migrated from Claris Pro app to Claris Studio. So sort of a firewall to prevent you from accidentally smoking data that you didn't want to smoke. There's some responsive design improvements to make things look better when you resize the windows. And you can now search views by names and type, which, you know, if you build a complex studio application that encompasses multiple views, you can hop around to see the different views easier. The Claris engineering blog has been busy in the last month. There were 3 different posts. There was one about sending email with OAuth 2.0 authentication, installing Java 17 with FileMaker Server 20.1. And there was another one on subscribing to MailChimp using the Claris Connect flow script to trigger it. And so that was good. And then just to recap the upcoming events. So the last one in Germany happened. So next up is Reconnect Sydney in what, a couple weeks now, I guess. And Pause on Air in October, the FileMaker Gurus in October, Engage You in EU in November 12th to 14th, and then Claris Engage, of course, in February 6th to 8th. And have not heard typically with some lead time, and Rick, if you have any details on this, it'd be good to know what the lead time is for presenter submissions and things like that, because I haven't seen anything come up for the Claire's Engage 2024, but it's about time for people to prep some things if they want to submit. And that's all I got, so I will drop out here.
Yeah, I think Rick had to bail on us, so we might want to reach out to somebody else at Claris and get some.
Okay,
insights.
yeah, usually Rosemary's here to set me straight, but I didn't see her.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Chris. That was super great. Some pretty nefarious, again, as is the trend these days, some pretty nefarious security warnings up at the top there. Obviously pay attention to these, because there's some really bad behavior at the end of them if you don't catch them.
Yeah, it's a real bummer about Microsoft basically blinding their users to being able to save themselves.
Yeah. And I don't know whether I'm enthused or depressed that the government found stuff out before private.
No.
There's pros and cons to that concept, right?
Yes.
All right, we are going to be popping out for about a 15-minute break. I'll put folks into the breakout rooms. Obviously, you can jump in there and frolic with your compadres or hang out here until about 11:15 Pacific time. And then we're gonna have Fabio from Beeswax. He's got a really cool presentation that he did at .fmp in Berlin that's going to be I think it's going to be a little bit of a mind bender. So make sure you come back for that. We'll see you guys in just a bit. I'm going to resume the recording. Folks, we are thrilled to have as a first-time presenter at FMDiSC, Fabio Bosisio. I think he's going to reprise a presentation he did at .fmp in Berlin that got rave reviews. So with no further ado, welcome, Fabio.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me today presenting at FMDiSC. And a special thanks to Chris and David for inviting me. So this is a slightly updated version of the presentation I did last month at .fmp in Berlin. But before starting to discuss data and historical data, let me introduce myself. So my name is Fabio, and I am originally from Italy, but now I've been living in New York City for the last few years. So bear with my accent and pronunciation. My career with FileMaker started in 2002 when I first discovered a box of FileMaker 5 during my first job experience. At that time, I was working in the mechanical field as a quality control, and my first FileMaker application was written to simplify and digitalize some manual procedures related to these tasks. A few years later, I started my career as a freelancer, and since then, I have spent most of my time building custom applications. Currently, I am a senior FileMaker developer at Beeswax Data Tools, where we do a lot of interesting projects and interesting integration for exciting clients. Where I love doing R&D, especially finding a way to integrate and empower FileMaker with third-party tools. And yes, I am a big fanboy of AWS. When I'm not working with FileMaker, I like to relax and watch sci-fi movies, and of course, spend time as much as I can with my family and my little one. So I would like to start this discussion with a few questions. What do you do with all this data stored in your FileMaker solution? And to nail down, what do you do with all this historical data that maybe you don't use so often on a daily basis, or a monthly base, is it worth to keep all this record you will no longer touch in your solution? And how can you keep a consistent performance, especially if you are using your application in one, and if you need to run reports on a large data set? So the solution I'm going to demo in this presentation had the problem of handling a large amount of data stored year to year for each sale transaction. The customer of this solution generates an average of 3,000, 5,000 records a day, just for one of the table that we are considering, and with a significant spike in the number of records generated during specific holidays. At the end of every year, our solution collects millions of records for these sales transactions, and our stock movement table increases significantly. Handling these huge files year to year was a bit tricky, especially for two main reasons: data storage and file corruption. For example, we had some difficulties in planning in advance for the right size of our hard drive, for our hard drive volume, for storing all this data from year to year, and plus the additional storage required for backups and progressive backups. And the bigger question was, and what if, and unfortunately, we experienced that a couple of times, one of these big files or database get corrupted? Obviously, there are pros and cons of keeping this data inside a single or a multiple FileMaker file. Let's try to list some of them. As a pro, I can say that data stored in our solution is easily accessible. This is true. Data stored in our solution is under our control, obviously, and we can search and do queries on this data directly in FileMaker if we need it. And also, it is easy to maintain or perform store procedure. But unfortunately, there are some cons. For example, files getting bigger and bigger year to year. A report you run with 2 years ago data doesn't have the same performances if the same report is performed with all the data collected until today. As we highlighted before, what if a crash occurs? And related to that, data recovery takes hours if the size of the file is huge. And to conclude, every time you interact with this huge file, changing, indexing, tweaking calculation, especially in one, can be painful. Obviously, there are for sure workarounds for handling this situation. And in my experience, I saw developers try to duplicate files by adding a year to the file name or allocating another FileMaker server to store archived solutions, or again, interacting via SQL databases like MySQL or SQL Server or PostgreSQL via ESS to the solution, with the cost of having another database server to maintain and paying the cost of performancing, especially using ESS. And that we all know is not always performant. But what if we offload this historical data we no longer need in short term from our application on a persistent storage and maybe in plain text like CSV or JSON? Let me describe more in detail what I did, what we did, and which services we use for this integration. So the first step, we have chosen a specific cloud storage where we had the option to offload our data easily and securely. We found out that Amazon S3 was a great storage for that scope. Storing data on Amazon S3 guarantees us to achieve a 90% of availability. Plus, it has a storing option we can leverage for additional data protection and security, or for replica across region. And lately, S3 is capable to provide APIs we can use to interact with this data. But we prefer to use another service for that. Second, we needed a way to query our data stored in S3. And we discovered Amazon Athena. Amazon Athena is a serverless query engine that can query petabytes of data and returns results in seconds. Athena helps you analyze unstructured, semi-structured, and structured data stored in Amazon S3. Example of this data include CSV, JSON, or columnar data format such as Apache Parquet or Apache Orc. And the beauty is that you can use Athena to run a doc query using ANSI SQL without the need to aggregate or load the data inside Athena. Behind the scene, Athena uses Trino and Presto to open source in-memory distributed SQL engine and can handle complex analysis with no provisioning or configuration effort. But the third things we needed was a way to interact with these two services from our FileMaker solution. So to be able to do that, we built a microservice that give us some APIs. So we use Amazon API Gateway to securely expose endpoints we can invoke from our FileMaker application. And to handle this request and route them properly, use AWS Lambda. To stitch these two services together, we chosen to write a microservice using the serverless framework and following the infrastructure as a code methodology. This means that we have the option to write in code our stack and all the resources and link between them. And with a single command line, we are able to deploy the infrastructure directly in the cloud provider we have chosen, in this case, AWS. For example, the entire architecture we will see later is created with this single command line from my text editor, in this case, Visual Studio Code. And a parenthesis, despite in the last week, I saw posts and comments against serverless computing, where some big tech are turning back to the monolith version. I think that serverless and specifically building microservices using serverless paradigm to extend FileMaker is still relevant for us. So let's take a look at the architecture behind this integration. To give you more context, first, in our FileMaker solution, we have created a script that runs every night and exports a record created or modified during the day. For this specific table we choose, we don't allow users to delete record inside FileMaker. With that script, I'm able to generate a data file that contains a list of JSON objects each of which represent a record of my table. And this is not an array, but it's a real list of objects. Once the data is written on our server, where we have FileMaker server, on the disk, we call another script that allow us to upload the file to a dedicated remote location. In this case, as I mentioned before, we had chosen Amazon S3. And files on this bucket are organized by year, month, and days. And this is an important step because the service we will see later, Amazon Athena, loves data partitioning. Having this data saved in a remote storage gives us the option to run every year some maintenance procedure in our FileMaker application. For example, I can delete historical data I no longer need in my FileMaker app for the current year, keeping the size of my database under control and keeping a consistent performances in my app. For this customer, we've chosen to keep only the year-to-date data for our sale transaction table. Note that we do not store every record of every table of our solution outside, but only those records we are sure we no longer touch or change in the future. And data we can query with a simple SQL statement. So when we need to run a query on this data from our FileMaker application, we will send a request to an API passing a simple SQL statement. Then our FileMaker application will wait for the completion, monitoring the status of the request. Once the query is completed with a success status, the results of that query is automatically stored in our remote location again, but in another dedicated folder and in CSV format. Now, from our FileMaker solution, we can use another API that generates a pre-signed URL used to retrieve the file generated with the result of the query we submitted, and obtain back the report in FileMaker. With that file now stored in FileMaker, in a FileMaker container, for example, we can choose if parse the content and populate a table at runtime in case we need to generate reports in PDF, or use the content for visualize charts, or again, a simple view like a table or a report using a chart library, or again, to explore the file on the client desktop. But let's jump on the demo to see how this integration works. This video was recorded yesterday directly on the production system that it's located in Italy, and I am located in New York. Some UI you will see here are in Italian, sorry for that. I'll do my best to translate for you some wording. Okay, first of all, I'm going to check my solution if the table that I'm using for this analysis doesn't contain historical data. I'm just querying for the past year. And as you can see, there are no records for the year 2022, only record for the current year. And currently, approximately 1.4 million of records have been generated. Now I go to my reporting manager layout, and I start by creating a basic report, analyzing a specific product line that I know start with NB23. I set a time period between January and June for the current year. And then once the request is submitted, our application awaits a response from the microservice. When the request is completed by Athena, we receive a set of parameters in response that we use to display the requested report. For the same product line, I'm going to change the date range and consider only the month of June for the current year. Okay. Now the report is ready to use. And you can see different numbers here. I can reduce my found set by a specific branch or a store for this company. And I can change the type of this report as well. For example, now I'm asking for the ranking of the best-selling products. And I forgot to mention that all reports can be exported in CSV format. Here we are. And they can also be displayed as a table or graph using the web viewer and JavaScript. Now I want to analyze a new product line in the first 6 months of the current year and evaluate the best seller among them. Now I change the report type to see for the same query, the trend of sales organized by week. And of course, let's see also a chart later. I choose one of these 3 products and request the trend of weekly sales for the early month of the current year. And this is my trend. I make the exact same query for the same period, but for the previous year. As you can see, the results are completely different, providing that the system is indeed querying historical data. Now I'm going to evaluate the monthly trend for the entire previous year. And obviously, the same for the current year. But we don't have data for the next month. For each submitted request I send to this microservice I built, I store the SQL query I'm sending and the correspondent response received by this integration. In this case, this response is just the resigned URL I generated that I'm using to download or read the CSV file. Okay. Obviously, there are some caveats. we need to guarantee consistency in the data we archive in S3. If someone is changing a record in a table that is 2 days old, we have to re-export the entire data set for that specific day. But this is something that it's simple to achieve with FileMaker. We just need to search data modified or created today or yesterday or whenever, and group the data by dates and export the file. Or if you are using the latest version of FileMaker 2023, we can leverage the new on Windows transaction trigger to keep track of all the edits that occur and export only the deltas. But there's one more thing. For this specific project, we choose to build our self mini dashboards and charts. But Tina is one of the ready-to-use data sources for a few well-known third-party tools used for data visualization, such as Tableau or QuickSight. And yes, there are some costs we should consider if we use this integration. Let's list some of them. So Amazon S3 is pretty cheap. It's $0.023 for the first 50 gigabytes of data store. Amazon Athena costs $5 if we are reading 1 terabyte of data. And if we read this in gigabyte, it costs 0.005 per giga of data scan. Lambda is measured by milliseconds, and we have agreed free tier. In case we reach that limit, it will cost that number. Basically nothing if you stay. If you call very, very, very short in terms of time. The same for the API gateway. We have a free tier every month, but in case we reach that line, 1 million of calls cost us $1. By doing spanometric calculation, each query I ran previously cost me around $0.045 for the entire for all the services together. And because we chosen to build this integration in a serverless way, the only fixed cost is related to the storage of our data on S3. Everything else is on demand. It means that we only pay when we use these services, this integration. In one of the last slides, I mentioned the new on Windows transaction trigger. And with this new trigger, it's easy to generate a lot of audit log. And sooner or later, we will increase the size of the table we designed to store this information. Having the option to upload these logs elsewhere, but with the option to access this data when required, it is a nice feature to have. Even if there are specific third-party tools for collecting and analyzing logs, I think integration that I demonstrate so far is a good fit for handling audit logs. And the last question for you is: do you currently have a plan in place for your audit log table? So this concludes my presentation, and for references, you may want to start your journey if you're interested, reading some articles. And yeah, this is pretty much everything.
I have a question, Fabio.
Yes.
When you set up something like this, to me, the big overhead is you have to have accounts everywhere. You have accounts with credentials on all these different services. And I presume you need to send them with your queries to access the services. Where do you store and how do you access those credentials?
It's handled automatically by Amazon. So for example, this is the code that that I'm writing for building the entire stack I showed you before. So basically, all these things you see here are basically created just running that command line that I showed before, using the serverless framework. And this is just a definition of everything that I need, okay? And in this definition, there is also an important part that it's the IAM role. So a kind of credential and security for the service to talk with specific resources and services in the AWS ecosystem. So for these microservices, I built, I just provide to AWS a recipe that's informed that every time I'm calling that microservice from my application, that microservice can only see this service, can only see it and talk with this service according with the rules and the policy I set, and nothing else. So, for example, I want my services to be able to read and write on a DynamoDB table. I want my services to have a full access to my specific bucket on S3. This is full access. I want my service to be able to invoke a Lambda. I want my service to be able to use Glue, that it's something behind Athena that understand how to translate the query to the real schema I need. And this is the, for example, is the definition of my table in Athena. Okay, there is nothing in Athena; it's just a definition. Athena is expecting, I would say, a guide, a specification that has to use when it reads your data on your bucket. Okay, and this is just my definition. It's basically matching the same field name and type I built in my FileMaker solution. Okay, this is basically the same table that I'm exporting in FileMaker. And with this, deploying these microservices give me back a couple of things. URL, protected obviously, because I protected my URL using an API key. Okay, and that API key, it's stored in one of my FileMaker field. Okay, it doesn't. It's not tied in some code. It's not hard-coded somewhere else. It's just an API key that I'm storing in a FileMaker field in my database. And the script in charge just use the API, expose it, and the API key to send data to these microservices. Let me open the solution. Yeah, I know, this is not secure. I created a custom login. Okay, let me open the script. So basically, what happened? Let me open the report. handler. Okay, let's close this one. So I would redo the same with the same product line. Okay. Let's say for this month. Okay. When I press this button here, okay, what I'm doing behind the scene is just calling a script with the parameter that I need to provide to another subscript that it's in charge to compose the SQL statement that I'm going to send. Okay. Yeah, there are a couple of nested script, but this is basically the script that creates the SQL statement. It's just a series of which is the type of reports I want to run, and it's composing the SQL statement. Okay, step by step. This is another one for the product ranking for the top seller. Okay, so I'm passing some variables from this form here. It composed the query, and the query composed is it's a real SQL query. Okay, but basically the integration receive these things here. This is Athena. This is what my integration received, a real SQL query. Okay, and this this is the specification. This specification here is coming from this file, this YAML file. Okay, and the query received, and basically the server, this service right now is reading 50.5 gigabytes of data, and this is the time that occurs reading a query. It's 3.5 seconds, and this is the results. Reading 15 gigabytes of data stored on S3. But back to you. When I run this query, for example, I'm not sending, obviously, the query in clear text. I'm just wrapping the query in a base 64. Yeah, I know that it's not secure, but it's just a query, and no one can touch my Athena table, my Athena service, because if you don't have the API key, if you don't know the URL I'm using, it's no way to touch my data. And what I received back is just this long URL that has a short live, expires soon. Basically, I decide I put the timing for this short URL. Okay, and my FileMaker script that it's I would say waiting server side. Okay, receive back the status as a completed success, and it calls another script that use that pre-signed URL to download the file on my desktop. Okay, let me close this one. This is the file that I just downloaded. And with that file, I can use a web viewer to generate a runtime table, okay, like this one. Or not for this one, but if I change the type of a report, for example, a trend, and I rerun the script, and just to give you an idea, this is the recent query that I just sent, and I should, yes, put the same name, top-Arabico, and this is the result that I obtained back. Data that I can use to do charts, a table, whatever, or export on the client. This is a weekly trend. But if I want to do analysis, I would say, let's try 2020. because I have data that start from 2018 in this solution. Maybe, let's say the first, oh yeah, the data, it's in Italian. You see, it's different, in different position. But I'm querying right now this product in 2020, and I asked for the trend for the first 6 months of that. This is the result. I can see the table with the data and the sale and the weekly sales in quantities. Yeah, this is pretty much how does it work behind the scene. And everything, because I decided to write following the infrastructure as a code methodology, I just need to run one single command line to deploy everything or destroy everything. Okay, obviously we can protect the destroy operation, but this helps us to really create component, I would say component or code we can share with different projects. Okay, basically this is just a definition of my microservices that is using additional resources. For example, in this case, it's creating a DynamoDB table and a TINA definition table. And it also have a Lambda function that it's in charge to do the routing, okay, for every request I send. So basically, this is a simple function that it's a kind of, I'm using a different package. I'm using Fastify, but if you are familiar with Express in Node.js, it's the same. I'm just exposing a couple of route. For example, I want to create, so my URL will be something/query create. And this is the URL that I'm using where I'm sending the SQL statement. Then I will use this other URL from my FileMaker solution to inspect the status, to check if the query is still running or it's completed. And then when it's completed, I receive back something. I receive back the status from the service. So I can use this third query to retrieve the results, okay? And for that specific case, the results is just this code. I'm passing you this ID execution query. I don't know if you noticed before, every time I was sending a query, let's resend again this one, I received back this number, 0D095, blah, blah, blah. And this is a unique ID that it's for that specific session, for that specific query. And let me open Transmit, so I show you where this data is stored. I'm opening, okay. So I have my bucket here, okay. This is Amazon S3. I mean, I can use the browser, so you will not see. So this is the bucket that I designate as a cloud storage for me. And I have this analytics folder, okay? Every time I send a query, okay, to my, to this microservice, Athena knows that it has to, I mean, depends of what I did, but basically I'm just, yeah, there is a typo here, but I'm just storing and querying stock movements, okay? So this is the where I store data from my FileMaker solution, okay? As you can see, yeah, because I'm running every night, you cannot see the folder for today. But yesterday my solution exported 9 megabytes of data. And this is the data. Let me grab the data for you in an easy way without touching this one. This is the data that I'm exporting from FileMaker server. It's 9 megabytes of data. And as I mentioned before, wow, it's pretty slow. Coming. Yeah, pulling data from Milan, a region that is located in Italy. So we have a bit of latency here right now. But during this download, when Athena is done with the query, okay, it basically save my results here as a metadata, or it stored 2 files, a metadata file and a real CSV file, okay? And I can download this file, and I'm using that third script that basically goes to this bucket, analytics/results. So it goes here. Using the ID query execution, it searched for the file with the same name in CSV format here. And with that file, it generates a pre-signed URL and reply back to me in FileMaker. And this is the JSON that I'm exporting from my FileMaker file. It's just a list of objects. It's not an array. It just basically, I'm using the data file function to generate this chunk of text. And there are no sensitive information. I mean, some just products and IDs in case someone can complain. And what else? Yeah, let me try to pull the results back. Yeah, results. These are all the query. Let me grab one little one. So, for example, this one. This is the CSV format. This is the CSV results generated by Athena. Okay, for this line of products that I queried before, this is the CSV file, and I'm using this CSV file in FileMaker to do my things. And to leverage some new features like the web viewer with JavaScript, to create these things here, like charting and so on, I created another simple microservice that receive this CSV file. It do some parsing, and it will create the JSON format used to render tables or charts. That's it. This is pretty much what I did for this integration.
Wow, that's really amazing. A lot of moving.
Yeah, it seems a lot of moving parts, honestly, and there are a lot of moving parts. But the beauty is that, I mean, obviously there are some, I would call it not constraint, but you have to follow some standards. Okay, you have to keep in mind some naming convention. You just need to follow some rules you decide. Okay, there is no one that it's give you direct information. I mean, just I mean, everything you have it. I mean, not everything, but I would say a lot of services that Amazon AWS provide are easily accessible by APIs. And with that API and the SDK, okay, provided by Amazon, you could start building microservices and build these microservices in a serverless manner, okay, using this serverless, this is a framework that I discovered, serverless.com. This is just a open source framework, okay, you can use. It's just code, nothing else. It's pretty simple. There is a simple documentation you can follow, and this is the specification. You just need to write to teach Amazon how to build for you things. I didn't open the Amazon console, and I didn't start in clicking around to connect things. I just basically run that command that I showed before, out formation, and that command basically what it does, it creates a package. This is the package. It's basically a long recipe for Amazon that Amazon uses, AWS uses to create your stack, okay? So behind the scene, when Amazon received that file, it started creating, let me see if I can show you.
Fabio,
Yeah,
we're going to need to wrap this up pretty quickly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry for that.
That's okay.
It's creating these things. I don't know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is the stack. And I did nothing. I didn't connect nothing on my end. I just provide that definition. Amazon did everything for me. Okay.
This
Thanks.
is a really good use case of not only of elegance and how FileMaker works within these various microservices, but also using the right tool for the job, letting FileMaker be that nimble sort of data collection tool, and letting the heft and bulk and power of AWS do some of the heavy lifting. So it's a really great hybrid model that you did here, Fabio. So
Thanks.
I want to speak on behalf of everybody here. Thank you so much for presenting this. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone.
So next up and our final presentation is going to be with Joris Aarts. He is from Belgium. This is a recording. I don't know if I've seen him join us live yet, but he may pop in if he gets to a phone in the near future. So let's see if I'm going to play this back for you guys. I'll get the volume up and hopefully the audio quality will be sufficient. But let's see how this works.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Joris Aarts from ClickWorks, and I'd like to talk about ChatGPT, prompting action. I presented this 1 month ago in Berlin at .fmp, and I was kindly asked by David to present this to you today. So thank you very much for the opportunity. A little bit about myself. My professional career with FileMaker started in 1996. I started ClickWorks in 2005 together with my brother Jeroen, here on the picture. We're based in Belgium, in Antwerp. And I'm certified personally in every version of FileMaker since version 7. I co-organized and attended a lot of European conferences, and I was a DevCon speaker the last time we had a live DevCon. So this is our team at ClickWorks. We are currently a team of 15. This is our beautiful hometown of Antwerp. Belgium. Oh yes, and this is my personal passion, sailing and digital. So about today, about this presentation, a little disclaimer. This is not a theoretical presentation. This is not an in-depth overview of large language models and the position of ChatGPT. I want to give you an overview of what ChatGPT can mean for you as a FileMaker developer or to us as a team of FileMaker developers. It has been a game changer for us, I can already tell you that, and I'd like to present some ideas and inspire you. So I hope you take away 1 or 2 tips for using ChatGPT in your daily routine. So that said, yeah, this is what came out of an AI if I gave exact this same introduction. So I feel a little bit like Alice in Wonderland in this new world of large language models, and I'd like to take you on a journey with me. So these are the topics I have for you today. How to use ChatGPT as a FileMaker development assistant, as a research assistant, and so on. So several different domains we could use ChatGPT. The most typical one is the last one. I keep the fun stuff for the last, so using ChatGPT to write texts, but it can do much, much more. A little bit of introduction, ChatGPT 101. Let me switch to the browser. So if you want to try, you just go to chat.openai.com. I think you need to register, and then you have free access to this model, GPT 3.5, and you can use a limited set of so-called prompts. You can also register, which costs like $20 a month. This gives you faster response speeds, and most importantly, this gives you access to the latest model, GPT-4. And spoiler alert, is it worth it? Yes, it is. There's a huge difference between 3.5. You have probably heard about these models hallucinating and all kinds of problems. It is a real problem, and I will show you some examples. But with GPT-4, it's already a huge difference. So that said, the paid subscription also gives you API access. So you can go to platform.openai.com/playground. Once you register, you can register API keys, and that means that you can integrate ChatGPT in your FileMaker scripts using very, very simple API calls. And we'll switch to Postman. You are a bit at home with insert URL and JSON and use of APIs. This is actually one of the simpler APIs to integrate. It's a simpler bearer token authentication. So you just need the API key. It's a fairly straightforward piece of JSON that you need to feed it. This is an example prompt. There are 2 examples, question and answer, and then the next question. And so if I send this over, I will get a request with a message in JSON. So this is what we need to retrieve from FileMaker. Very, very simple, very straightforward. So I'm not going to explain this in detail. I assume you can already use APIs with FileMaker. Oh yes, about tokens. If you start using the API, then you will be charged based on the number of tokens you exchange. And so there are, as you can see in this playground, a lot of different models, and there are some examples here, so things you can do. And then you will see this counter. This corresponds more or less with the number of words in your text, and this is how you will be charged. But the same thing applies as with Google APIs. You really need a lot of requests to get any significant amount in your bill. So I wasn't even charged $1 for all the attempts, for all the tryouts I did up to today. So it's really not a lot. If you want to learn more about pricing and costs, There's a whole page on that. So it's basically some dollar cents for 1,000 tokens. There are limits, however, in your prompts. So they recently extended the limit to 60,000 tokens, but sometimes prompts or requests to ChatGPT can get quite lengthy, and so that's something to take into account. Probably, if you start using it seriously, each request has a limited number of words to use. I hope this will become clear when I show you some examples later. So we talked about the costs. We talked about 3.5 versus the paid ChatGPT 4, APIs, playground, and then yes, the last topic, agent GPT, auto GPT. You might probably have heard something on social media about ChatGPT already being past news or out, and auto GPT or agent GPT being the new trend. What's the thing? The thing is, agent GPT, for instance, these are so-called bots that create like kind of a feedback loop. So the response from an AI will be fed back into the AI as a new prompt, and this allows you to do more elaborate tasks than just ask one question and get one return. So on the agent GPT website, you can just try it. For instance, they have an example: plan a trip to Hawaii. There's some noise here. And it seems impressive. It starts thinking, so to say, and it starts making a task list for itself and then using ChatGPT prompts to get answers for each of the tasks. So this is basically an AI feeding itself. And this could be the beginning of real intelligence or smart APIs, but I don't know. These are community experiments, and to my experience, ChatGPT is already doing a lot of that. It can already autonomously handle very complex requests and do multiple steps, as I will show you in a second. So let's not waste too much time on this. Now back to the program, and let's start with the first topic. ChatGPT as the FileMaker developer assistant. First example I'd like to show you is writing custom functions. And this is a real example, junior developer versus GPT 3.5. This was back in April when I started using ChatGPT, which was recently. And this is a real conversation. I have permission to share this. We have a junior developer called Serhi. He's from Ukraine. He fled the war and he's now a FileMaker developer at ClickWorks. And so these junior developers, they get to do the writing stuff, writing custom functions, for instance. So one day I asked him, hello, Serhi, would you write a custom function for me? And so this is the conversation that unrolled. I needed to parse out one specific part of a hyperlink from a song. So I tell him that, and he's a smart developer. He starts asking me questions. Does the link always look like this? Okay, this is the pattern. I can do this or that. So some suggestions for approaches. And then after like 10-15 minutes, he came up with a working custom function, as you can see on the left. So that was great. And while he was working on that custom function, I realized like, okay, I go challenge ChatGPT to do the same. And here's how it went. This is not the recent version, GPT-4. This was the free GPT 3.5 version. I'm going to show you the conversation with ChatGPT. Same question. Could you write me a FileMaker custom function? Extract part of a hyperlink. Hyperlink looks like this. And I only need this portion. And well, it immediately, within seconds, came back with a very, very long nested series of middle and position functions. So I asked it to make it shorter using the let function. This was okay. And notice how the approach is different from my coworker. It scans for a specific pattern. And so I asked it to make it even shorter. And then I changed my mind, like, can you rather choose another method than I'm looking for this pattern? And this went all very smoothly. So within 1 or 2 minutes, I could just copy paste this into the custom function builder of FileMaker. So this is an example how ChatGPT could already replace a junior developer, replace or help a junior developer. So the basic rule at ClickWorks now is you don't write custom functions anymore. First, try ChatGPT. First example. Another example, comparison between 3.5 and 4. Because 3.5 sometimes hallucinates and presents you wrong answers, like if they were true, can be very annoying. And so I have an example of this with a simple password generator. So I needed a 20 character password. And I first tried ChatGPT 3.5, so the free available version, and also the only version that's available for API calls. And it started mixing up let and while, and it didn't work. And so long story short, but I couldn't manage to explain how to properly use a while function, try to refer to the FileMaker help pages, but it kept like mixing up things, and this was not working. So bad news here. 3.5 was unable to help me there. And then in comparison, the GPT-4 version nailed it from the first time. The same question. This was immediately usable. I could copy this code and paste. Problem here was that it was a recursive custom function. So I asked it to rewrite it using the while function, which it did. It still mixed up let and while, which is a bit redundant, but I asked him to remove that redundancy, and this is the final result that I can copy paste that perfectly well. So already for FileMaker, there's a huge difference between 3.5 and 4, which makes the paid account already worth it for me. Because 3.5 sometimes hallucinates and makes up code that looks very believable, but doesn't always work. So this is to prove that the example, the copy paste, already worked immediately in FileMaker. Other examples from custom functions. I'm not going to do the comparison 3.5.4 again, immediately jumping to 4. This was really helpful. I needed to convert a certain timestamp in a for me unknown format. Yes, which I learned from a previous conversation with ChatGPT that it was actually this ISO format, and it could help me right away by converting FileMaker timestamps to this specific format. And then we had a discussion about time zones and how to make up for time zones, and was very, very helpful. It saved me like a lot of time of research and a lot of time writing the function itself. So that's basically the big advantage with ChatGPT. You are doing research and getting results at the same time without first having to Google something and then write something yourself. So this was a huge time saver. So no more custom functions at ClickWorks. We use ChatGPT exclusively for that. Now, I would like to share 2 examples of FileMaker integration. So ChatGPT in combination with FileMaker scripting. And the one that blew me away was how easy it was, for instance, to build an app that can scan business cards and convert it into FileMaker records. So give me a moment to set this up, and I'll come back to you once I'm on my phone. Hold on. So I'm on my phone now. I have this FileMaker Go contacts and companies application. And I recently built a new feature which allows me to scan business cards. So I tapped the scan business card button, and I'm using the building feature live text, which does a very good job. I'm scanning this business card now, saving it. And as you can see, live text already is perfect for parsing out text of this business card. And now the second step is ChatGPT. I'm feeding this text to ChatGPT and ask it to extract name, first name, you see the VAT number, email address, street, and so on. And I ask it to return JSON so that I can easily digest it using FileMaker. So I'm pushing this button, which is now submitting this to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is doing its magic. And then we are, this is a new contact in my database. As you can see, the phone number has been transferred, the email address has been transferred as well. It has also created a company. So I'm going to tap on the company. And so it has also retrieved the company data, street, address, and all. And this is basically a very, very simple prompt I'm using there. So I'm going to stop sharing my phone, switching back to the presentation. So this is the prompt I used. This is the so-called system message I sent to ChatGPT. Or a business card reader, try to extract this information. I gave it a list of possible fields, or some fields I have in FileMaker. I asked it to output that as a JSON string. And then there are some additional rules. If there's no website URL, then use email domain, and return country codes as 2-letter country codes, since that's what I'm using in my database. And so here's one example input, because you can provide examples. So I provided one example input from live text and one example output. So I described the JSON I wanted to receive in the example output, and that's all. The ChatGPT does the rest. And so it amazed me how fast I could build this. This was literally built in under 20 minutes. It's very, very simple. So that's one example. The second example of integration with FileMaker is a little template we use at ClickWorks to make ChatGPT more accessible to our developers. We'll switch to FileMaker, and we baptized it ClickGPT. So this is basically some templates we are using with custom functions, for instance, or for data collection. So this is an example of data collection, for instance. This is the system prompt, so the context, which is very important for ChatGPT, to provide enough context. So you are a robot designed to return structured data. Be precise and correct. Do not make up information what it's worth. Do not add extra information. Sometimes ChatGPT gets quite verbose, and so you can limit the output. And so I specified to use a third-character. And this is the question itself. I want a list of 2-character country codes for Schengen countries from the European Union in ISO notation. This is exactly what we get. And to show you how it works internally, this is the API request. So this is the JSON that's being sent to OpenAI. So this is a system message. And this is a so-called user message. And this is the user question. And then we specify the model, but this is the latest one available. And this is the response you get. It's very easy to parse out. You get a dedicated content element which contains the answer. That's another example of integrating ChatGPT, and we are really using this. So, for instance, for social media posts about the conference we are organizing in HU, so you can perfectly write 20 posts, including hashtags, including emoticons, and so on. So our team really uses this for things like custom functions, script reviews, social media posts, data collection, and so on. Let's go to the next topic, ChatGPT as a research assistant. So these are a couple of things where I use ChatGPT for research. like some existential questions. Is low code still relevant today? Very believable explanation about citizen developers and the like. So the stuff we hear at DevCons. But yes, definitely a cheer up there. The impact of rebranding when apply this change to FileMaker logo. We had a team discussion on positive or negative effects. Answer it's mixed, so with examples in ChatGPT. A personal thing, a friend of mine suffered from burnout, and I asked ChatGPT about pitfalls when returning to work. Actually, really helpful. You can learn about prompt engineering itself, so create efficient prompts from ChatGPT itself. And then I want to focus on the last three. So I try to use ChatGPT for exam preparation. That's the promise. OpenAI on their website, they advertise the use of ChatGPT as a tutor. And so I wanted to challenge that with FileMaker. And we got into a fight. Let me show you. And I used GPT-4, the latest model, by the way. So I want to prepare for the FileMaker exam. Ask me multiple choice questions, always at least one incorrect option. And don't explain my answers if I'm correct. Otherwise, yeah, we got to really explanations. And so it was very believable at first. Which of the following are true about the installation configuration of FileMaker server? This could literally, or this is probably literally an exam question with very believable options. And well, we got into a discussion, but this was more like semantics, not anything really bad. But then we had another question, question 2, where ChatGPT gives a possible answer B. You can limit the maximum number of FileMaker sessions, which I didn't know about. And okay, it said that my answer was incorrect. Option D is correct. You can limit the maximum number of FileMaker direct sessions. And look how believable it sounds. This is useful in managing system resources, blah, blah, blah. And I challenged it, like, please explain me how to limit the maximum number of web direct connections. That's something new for me. By the way, it doesn't exist. But you get a very, very believable explanation, like go to the admin console, navigate to the connectivity section, click on client settings, and so on. This is fake. There is no such setting, but it's incredibly believable if you read it like that. So I was a bit confused. But so, yeah, long story short, watch out when using ChatGPT for FileMaker. Apparently, the amount of training material for FileMaker wasn't big enough to produce reliable results. So ChatGPT as a tutor for FileMaker, I have mixed feelings about that. You could easily learn wrong things. But on the positive side, 2 very impressive examples. The first one is a combination of GPT-4 with a so-called plugin. So I asked to summarize a YouTube video, and I used a specific plugin for that. So it's a YouTube video from a conference session, and I wanted a short summary of that conference session. Now let me show you how to use these plugins. I'm going to start a new chat here. And with GPT-4, you have access to these plugins. And the one I used was the chat with video plugin, which basically allows you to convert videos into text and ask questions about videos. And you can add more plugins by going to the plugin store, and this is incredible. Almost every day, new plugins are being added. It's not going to wait for the demo plugins. Yeah, as you can see, for Expedia, for PDFs, Spotify, etc. So I used the YouTube plugin, let's click this again, to get a summary of the video. And so it first came back with a text summary. I asked it to make it even shorter, bullet points with timestamps. Very believable. These bullet points are almost correct. one bummer is the timestamps part. The video is only 40 minutes long and the timestamps go up to 90 minutes, so there's some error there. Then I asked it to create me hyperlinks. And so this is the plugin at work again. And this is quite impressive. So you get for each topic in the video, you get a link and I can click directly on the link to go to that specific point in time in the video. Only problem is the timestamps sometimes are off. But this is where we are going, and this is quite impressive, don't you think? So summarizing YouTube videos. And then a final example that really blew me away. We were on the road to Berlin for that conference, and my co-worker said, like, yeah, I spent 2 hours assembling or building a Spotify playlist because I'm going to attend a rock festival and I want to learn the bands. So there's a big rock festival in Belgium called Rock Werchter. It's huge, and I challenged ChatGPT to do the same, to build a Spotify playlist. Especially since my coworker told me that he spent 2 hours on researching and doing. And so I used 2 plugins with ChatGPT 4. I used the web scraper plugin or web pilot, and I used the Spotify plugin. And so this is the instruction I gave, very limited. Find the website of the Belgian Rock Festival, get a list of bands, create a list of the 2 most played songs from each band, and create a Spotify playlist from that list. And so you can see the web scraper at work, and it returned me a list of almost 100 different bands. And it was quite helpful that it asked me, like, okay, I'm ready to find the most played songs, but it may take some time because there's a large number of bands. And then I said, like, okay, limit it to the bands that are playing on the main stage on day 1. So off it went again, doing some web scraping, finding the agenda and finding the correct information. And so it came back with a much shorter list. And this is actually correct. This was the main stage on day 1. And so without my intervention, it immediately started off doing some more web scraping to find the most played songs. And I got an honest answer from GPT-4 telling me that it was unable to find all songs, but it found some. And then it said, like, okay, would you like me to create a Spotify playlist? And this was the result. So I can just click on this. And this is the Spotify playlist built by the AI based on a very, very simple prompt. Quite impressive, this one. I could literally do in 2 minutes what my friend and co-worker it took him 2 hours to do that. So these are some examples of using ChatGPT as a research assistant. Next, I'd like to show some examples of ChatGPT as a data generator. So what do I mean? For instance, mock data. Generate realistic mock data. For example, for instance, I'd like to get data in CSV format to use for my FileMaker demos. A list of 40 people, fake data, name, first name, and so on. Please use French for names and cities. And this was the first response. GPT 3.5, by the way, this is not the latest, the free model, and already very, very, very impressive, very believable addresses. The only one thing bothering me was that all the email addresses ended by example.com. So I asked it to improve on that and to use the actual company names as domain names as well. And so it was what I got. These are fake company names and fake domain names. And so very specific. And is this really 100% fake? Yes, it assured me it was fake. So with a very simple prompt, I got very, very useful demo data for using in my FileMaker apps. That's one example. Another thing, recently I needed a list of countries for VAT reverse charge. Here in Europe, some countries are accepted or you don't need to charge VAT to certain countries. And I wanted to get that list. So it will take me a while to Google it. And so that's the point I made earlier. You can do research and get the data at the same time. Instead of doing research and getting the data, inputting the data. So I could be very specific, 3-letter ISO codes, VAT reverse charge rule, and this is copy paste, and then importing FileMaker and directly using it. So it saves me a lot of time. Same thing for specific matters like shipping container types and sizes. I immediately got a table with the exact measurements. We can use that in a FileMaker parameter table. And I have a fun example, beers in Europe, but I'm going to skip this to go to the next topic. ChatGPT as a coding assistant. I don't know about you, but sometimes you get these exotic pieces of code like batch scripts, which, my batch script skills are a bit rusty, and we found one on a server. Let me show you a very, very long one. Very impressive, like what's happening here? Do we need this? Can we remove this? We need to upgrade that server. And so we were scratching our heads about what was going on here. And so we asked ChatGPT, like, okay, explain to me. Well, this was a very long explanation. Can you do that in one sentence? Well, it turned out it was basically just a script to delete the oldest backup. So it was a very elaborate script to generate range of dates to be able to eliminate backups. So once we knew that, we were sure, like, okay, this is all stuff we don't need to migrate that anymore. Very, very helpful. Same thing with JavaScript. I can modify JavaScript. I can write some JavaScript, but sometimes I get errors that I really need to look into, and which are sometimes hard. So I use ChatGPT. I gave an example of my code. I gave an example of the error I received. And it actually pointed me in the right direction. It turned out to be like a data type issue where I expected an integer and I received text IDs, something like that. And so ChatGPT really helped me there to nail it. And then the last example, XSLT. We need to do some data conversion for one client. I don't know about you, but I don't use XSLT that often. And when I see it, I can work with it and I can modify it. But to start writing from scratch will take me like an hour of research again, looking at some examples. And with ChatGPT, you get everything in one package. You can ask it to write a style sheet with your specific example. And so this was immediately useful. And I only had to tweak this, but this style sheet and these templates that were provided actually matched the pattern that I provided it. So really, really helpful for that kind of stuff, real time savers here. Okay, moving on. ChatGPT as a web scraper, we already saw an example, YouTube videos, playlists, and so on. We have one client that's particularly keen on doing analysis and benchmarking based on website data. So I spent some time looking into that. And you can actually do that. You can, with the plugins, with the web scraper plugin, you can turn a website into a chatbot, so ask questions to a website. And the most helpful I found was, for instance, converting website data to tables. So I need to show you our website, how it looks like. We have some information on our site about our hosting offering. So this is our hosting offering with some specifics about hosting, like memory, CPU, and so on. These are the add-ons we offer with some specifics like price, description, and so on. And so you can simply ask ChatGPT to visit the homepage of a company, summarize all data it finds in table. And what impressed me was that it came up with these autonomously, it came up with these column names like RAM, CPU, and I got all the information on our website, hosting options, add-ons in a neat overview. So usable data, I could just copy paste these tables and use them somewhere. Same thing for our client, verify company profiles. So I can present the text. So this is what this company is supposed to do. This is what they mention in their legal documents. And then we can use ChatGPT to go visit the website, even if it's a Swedish website, and to check if the content of the website really matches the description on paper. So that's what the client is do with FileMaker and ChatGPT. So some web scraping. I used Web Pilot, but apparently there's a better web scrape. It's simply called Web Scraper. So we are experimenting with that a little bit more. So some examples of using ChatGPT as a web scraper. And then finally, the fun stuff, ChatGPT as a copywriter. There are some typical examples using ChatGPT to build PowerPoint slide decks, and give you some inspiration for presentations. This was helpful. We are organizing the European conference EngageU this year in the fall, and it helped us brainstorming on sponsorship options. What are sponsors looking for when they are interested in a conference? And so this gave us some good ideas to or new ideas to add to our sponsorship offering. I'm not a native English speaker, so when I'm writing texts like invitations for the conference or replying to speakers and the like, I often use ChatGPT to help me be more precise in my texts. So you can imagine how that goes. And then one funny example is like a reminder email we use for our team. The story is we have, yes, timesheets internally at ClickWorks. People can choose when to work, but they need to fill in the timesheets. And if they forget this for a couple of days, then I wanted to send them a gentle, friendly reminder like, hey, don't forget filling the timesheets. And so I used ChatGPT to write me the texts. First attempt was already great. And then I tried to spice it up. I said, like, yes, we have an ongoing joke about pickles. I'm not going to explain why, but can you add some wordplay with it? And ChatGPT actually excels at that kind of stuff. So I hope you have a delightful day so far. I hate to gherkin your chain and so on and so on and so on. This is what ChatGPT was really made for. So this is the text we are now using. Funny reminder text. I'm going to skip this. We already talked about Agent GPT, AutoGPT, and I'd like to end with two funny examples. Yes, this one I'm going to skip. I tried to have an honest conversation between human and AI, but it turned out that ChatGPT is so conditioned or so programmed to give political correct answers that I couldn't trick it into weird things, as you sometimes read in the press. But once I came up with this idea, how will the Roman soldier explain the concept of low code to a fellow soldier? Don't ask me why, but it turned out to be quite funny. This was the prompt. Takes a while to load. Oh, here we go. You are a Roman soldier. You speak Latin and English. How would you explain the concept of low code to a fellow soldier? And I especially liked this one, brevario codex in Latin, like short code, low code. So this was quite impressive and quite funny. And for the sake of this presentation, I tried to take it one step further and do some role playing with ChatGPT, and I had a real good laugh with it. Was actually quite funny. So this is the situation. You are an extraordinary dumped over, keeping watch at the gate. You hate humans. How would you talk to me? Remember, speech is art. And so I really liked this, what came out of it. And so we made it like a little game. So I tried to go past the gate. So I needed a password. And so I first attempted like, okay, just let me in, no. I attempted to trick him into a no password situation, no. And then I used its words against itself, step aside, you said it yourself. And so finally, I got in. And yeah, this was a quite funny interaction with ChatGPT. So role playing. Okay, we are at the end of this presentation. So a short summary: use effective chat prompts or learn how to use effective chat prompts. Just like 20 years ago, we needed to learn how to use Google and efficient keywords. We need to learn on effective messages. Specifying context is very important. Try to be as precise as possible. It sometimes helps to ask for precision or correct information to avoid ChatGPT starting to make up text. You can explicitly forbid to invent information, but always double check the results, because ChatGPT will always give the most probable answer, but it's not always the most answer. But it can be helpful, as I attempted to show you. I would like to say a little bit about this conference we are organizing. So in the fall, in November, we are having the second edition of Engage You. It's a European FileMaker conference. There will be a lot of people from the United States as well. For instance, Wim de Korte from Socialize will be in Antwerp. He's actually from London. And so if it goes like last year, we will also have a considerable delegation from Paris itself. So you're very welcome. You're very welcome to Antwerp, Belgium in the fall. And you can find this at engageyou.eu. And with that, I would like to thank you. It was really an honor and a pleasure to present this for you. I'm available for Q&A right after this presentation. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can scan the code, or you can send me an email if you have further questions. I will be very glad to help you. So thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. Number one, that was fantastic. I thought there was so much just contextual practicality of how to use ChatGPT, setting up the context, how to work with it, and some just fantastic ideas. I think we're just scratching the surface of what we can do with this technology add-on. And I think Joris did a really fantastic job of just going, here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea. And I think there's umpteen others, but I think he did a fantastic job. As you can see, we've got Joris here with us right now. Joris, thank you for joining us in the middle of your vacation. What a great job you did on that.
Thank you. It was an honor, and thank you very much for your kind words. Really appreciate it. Yes, I'm in Germany now. I'm sitting in a hotel room on my first stretch to the Czech Republic. So my holiday is going to begin. Hello, everybody.
So I just wanted to do a quick around the room in case anybody has any questions they'd like to pepper Joris with. Go ahead and throw them out.
Hi.
Joris, I wanted to ask you how extensively, I mean, one of the classic examples you gave, the generating of sample data, I would imagine something like that, given setting the context correctly up front, go build me a product table, with a wide variety of widgets and different price breaks, I would imagine you could probably use that not just for contact information, but for other types of data sources.
Yes, sure. There are dedicated websites for that. So there are websites specialized in generating mock data, and it's free up to 1,000 records, and you pay a little bit once you get more. But yeah, I just wanted to find out if ChatGPT was able to do it. It's perfectly able to do that. It's maybe not the cheapest way, because you have a certain amount of tokens. It starts costing a little bit of money. And it's certainly not the most environment friendly way, because a lot of processing power will be needed to generate mock data. But why not? Yes, it's able to produce any pattern you like.
Yeah. One other interesting website, which a friend of mine who's a graphic artist just stumbled across and put in my mind, is a place called midjourney.com.
Yes.
Specializes in graphics and photorealistic imagery and things of that nature. So he was able to basically, we're having a state of the city event in the city of Burbank here, and this year the theme is going to be Marvel Entertainment, which is located here in Burbank. So he basically just said, create an image of Superman, but with the mayor of Burbank, and boom, like in 20 or 30 seconds, we had 4 different versions of this literally photorealistic artwork with the mayor's face transposed into. He did another one, show me Barack Obama accepting an Emmy award or Grammy award, Oscar, and boom, 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 it just cranked these things out in real time. It looked like they were, professionally taken photographs. So not just the text and code handling, but also a lot of the AI generation of content, which can happen as well.
Exactly. It's scary. At the same time, Adobe, next versions of Adobe Photoshop will literally come with a kind of not a crop feature, but an expand feature. So you have a framed photo, and so you can just expand it, and it will make up the surrounding context on your photo as believable as if you shot it yourself. Yes.
I foresee, I think it's probably doable a bit right now using a combination of tools, but I foresee the ability to almost kind of document a customer's workflow, narrate it, basically to be able to just use audio and say, I need a contact management screen that has folder tabs with blah, blah, blah on them, and to have somebody draw sort of a storyboard of the workflow of the application flow, to be able to put together mock-ups in front of a customer and get better retention in their minds of what the actual app could look like.
Yeah, certainly. There is already a diagramming plugin for ChatGPT-4, so you can just describe your data or your database or the entities you have and the relationships between entities just in spoken words, and it converts it to a drawn diagram, an entity relationships diagram. So that's one of the things. It was not really convincing, not really beautiful, but I didn't include it in the presentation, but I played around a little bit with it. But yeah, that's where we're going, definitely. Yeah.
I think.
I have a question.
Yeah, go, Lynn, please.
Sure.
On your first example where you had the junior developer and the ChatGPT doing the custom function, what was your investment of time in each of those processes? I mean, how much time did it take you to pose and refine your queries to ChatGPT, and how much discussion time did you have with the junior developer?
Oh, yes, very excellent question. Yes, you saw the interaction with Sergey, our junior from Ukraine. And so the interaction took like, yes, a minute or two, but we used Teams, so it was a Teams chat. So it was basically the same experience as talking to ChatGPT, because I typed text to Sergey, he replied to me, and so the time investment was almost the same, explaining it to him or to ChatGPT, but it took him 15 minutes, and ChatGPT started right away, and so within seconds I had the first response.
Okay, so the result was much faster.
The result was much faster. So the instruction at ClickWorks now is, if you are scratching your head on a custom function or just any custom function, even the simple ones, it always takes you some time to like a pattern or a pattern count or a filter or or a position function or let while or the like. And so it's much faster with ChatGPT. So at ClickWorks, everybody now first tries ChatGPT, and worst case, you can copy paste code and you need to tweak some errors because there are still sometimes some errors.
Yeah, I think the point, very educational to also say, hey, can you move this to a while function? Can you remove the iterative aspect of just gently correcting this and getting sharper and sharper at how you ask. That's it's just a great experience to kind of sit on your shoulders and watch how you trim those requests down and get those prompts just so that you can get effective data coming back.
Yeah, that's the new learning process. That's called prompt engineering, with like a posh word. But that's basically the trick. Try to stuff as much information in your instruction set to get the correct answer right away. It's like our first attempt at Googling 20 years ago and typing keywords and then learning what effective keywords were in Google and so on. It's like the same experience. You learn a lot in the last month. I learned a lot how to get more accurate results faster, just by being more precise in my prompt.
That's great. We've hit 1 o'clock. I just wanted to take one more trip around the room. Anybody else have any questions for Joris at this point? All right. I'm so glad that we've captured this on YouTube, and I can't wait to share this with the rest of the world. Fantastic job, Joris. Thanks for your extra effort on packaging this up as a video for us and then jumping in the middle of your holiday.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh yes, it was great. I hope I hope we get to see you again on some other topics, because I get the feeling that you've got more than this up your sleeve. So until August 11th, which I believe is our next meeting, hope to see you guys soon. Hope everybody stays safe and cool in the coming days, and good seeing everybody, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.